Good day, this is Jeff Rouse, and I'm in Our Story Studios. And look who stopped to visit.
Martin County Courthouse employees.
Awesome. And what's the purpose of the group?
We're here to serve you.
Love it. That's awesome. You know, we just got done shooting another episode of Martin County on TV. Would you like to see that episode right now? You can. All right, let's go to that. We want to welcome our guest host once again, our friend Lenny. Welcome aboard, Lenny.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
And we have a couple very, very cool and different segments today that I think the folks are sure to like. First one, we get right into it. First one, Lenny, is, get my sheet here, 50 years of KSUM, a report that was done by our friend Marnie in 1999 on Focus on Fairmont.
Right. Well, I think most of you know that Woody Woodward sold the radio station, and KSUM came on the air on New Year's Eve, 1947. I take that back, 1948.
Okay.
And it's had
So
quite a long...
exactly 70 years this year.
If you say so.
Okay, we're going
I'm
with
not going to
that.
do the math. But Woody was contacting me. He had some old radios, historic radios, he wanted to donate. And I said that, well, I'll take a look at them, take a couple of them maybe. We went out there and they all were so great, we took all of them.
How
Probably,
many?
I'm not sure, 15, 20 radios.
Oh my gosh, how cool.
And he's also donated the KSUM neon sign and the transmitter that we also have in the Carlson room, and that's where the radios are displayed at the present time. So it makes for a very nice display.
And that was 70 years so far.
Right.
So was there radio stations in town before?
They were the first radio station in Fairmont. However, the first radio station was in Welcome.
Okay.
KFVN, I think were the call letters, and that was prior to
That was a
KSUM.
ways back.
Yeah, it was a ways back.
Well, this again, like I said, is a report done by Marnie Brodt in 1999 on Focus on Fairmont, about 50 years of KSUM. So let's take a look.
Sounds good.
Radio station KSUM is celebrating 50 years of programming in our area, and our community reporter Marnie Brodt was there at the beginning, and she's still there to tune in.
For 50 years, listeners in south central Minnesota and northern Iowa have been tuning their radio dials to 1370 KSUM. News, entertainment, community service. That's what hit the airwaves on New Year's Eve of 1948 and what Woodward Broadcasting continues to bring listeners today. Its owner, Woody Woodward, takes pride in KSUM's rich history.
Leo Seifert was the attorney that had originally invested and owned the radio station. He had other investors from the community involved. I don't know all their names. He hired Frank Endersby, Warren Asher. They had Annabelle Webb, Marv Carlson, just a host of people, and just started a great radio station.
A member of the Mutual Broadcasting System, KSUM offered favorite national programming. KSUM also produced local programs.
Everything back then was live, and the original studios were built up above what is now the gas company, and these main studios were suspended from the ceiling so that when trucks drove by, the vibrations wouldn't disrupt things in the studios. So it was really quite a unique broadcast facility.
After 10 years, Leo Seifert sold KSUM to Mr. John Hyde. Mr. Hyde operated the radio station until 1962. Then Woody's parents, Charles and Elizabeth Woodward, bought the station.
My parents were really all about not just the side of being business owners and making a profit, but being able to make a difference in the community where they lived.
Liz and Charlie won the hearts and respect of the Fairmont community. Charlie was a generous and kind-hearted man, and Liz, she loved life and energized everyone she met. Those were the years when many of us began our day with KSUM Farm Director Marv Carlson, his corny jokes and plugs for the second-hand store. We'd catch the local news with Frank Endersby as he reported from a downtown business or a neighboring town.
Into custody and confessed to setting at least 5 fires in that village.
And who of us old-timers can forget Annabelle Webb, our flamboyant neighbor who interviewed people live from her living room card table or the bathtub, depending on the subject. It was Frank Endersby who got Annabelle started.
And the mics were shaking, and so was I. And I thought, I'll never get through this. Called Frank up and said, I can't do this, Frank. I can't do this every morning. Well, he said, keep on a few more days and we'll see how it goes.
Those voices from KSUM's past are still recognizable to many of us. In July of 1974, a month before his father died of cancer, Woody joined the KSUM staff. He and his mother helped break ground for a new broadcasting facility in June of 1981. In February of '82, KSUM KFMC moved from the Seifert building on North Park to its new facilities on Lair Road. Times were changing.
When I first came here and when my parents came here in the 60s, a radio station programmed a little bit of everything for everybody. Well, nowadays in radio, with the number of signals out there and the number of stations have more or less decided on a specific format, and they target a group of people that they want to reach, and they focus all their programming in that direction. So, you know, in one sense, it makes a radio station a little more user-friendly because you know exactly what you're going to get. In another sense, it's kind of a shame that we've lost the variety programming that we originally had.
Today, KSUM features a country music format. Brothers Mike and Pat Murphy, hosts of the morning show since the mid-'80s, have seen technology change the radio industry. Instead of spinning big 78 RPM records, 33s or 45s, they now pop in CDs. The radio interviews that were once recorded on reel-to-reel tape, then cassette tapes, are now recorded on mini discs. The quality is fantastic and the workload much less.
I'll leave this one.
However, while the technology, talent, and staff have changed with the times, KSUM's commitment to its listeners has not.
So we're very proud that we're able to be part of Fairmont, and we want to watch Fairmont continue to grow, continue to be successful, and we want to be part of that growth and that success.
For Hometown Focus, I'm Marnie Brodt.
Well, that was a great report,
Right.
and Marnie's interview with Woody was outstanding.
Right. And I really like to acknowledge Woody and our appreciation for his donating those artifacts from KSUM, the neon sign, transmitter, and the new or I should say new, the old radios that we just received in the past, recently anyway.
Oh, great, yeah, and what an asset to our community to
Right.
have that radio station and continue.
Correct, right.
Very, very cool. So, good report. Next on the agenda, this one, out of the past, one you did for our story in 2007 with the guy, his last name is Mondale?
Like a politician.
Walter Mondale. Lenny, share with us a little bit about how, why, and what took place to get an interview with the man who ran for president, vice president, Walter Mondale.
Right, well, he's originally from Ceylon. He was born in Ceylon. His father was a Methodist minister. He moved to Elmore and graduated from Elmore. I just got to thinking one day that, you know, being a Martin County native, I wondered if he'd do an interview.
Sure.
So I sent an email up. I got his email address, sent it up to his office, and went home for lunch. When I came back, he had sent an email back to me, copied his secretary, and said, set a date, line up an interview, he'd be glad to do it. And we went up and did the interview, and he was very gracious, just very kind, and had a very fun experience.
Well, let's take a look at it right away. I'm anxious to show
Sure,
the
sounds
folks. From 2007, Out of the Past, Our Stories production with Lenny and Walter Mondale.
Welcome to Our Story. This is Lenny Tvedten. Today I have the honor of speaking with former Vice President of the United States, Walter Mondale, who also happens to be a former Martin County resident, born in Ceylon and grew up in some small towns in southern Minnesota. And I think what we'll start with is Ceylon and your parents. What did they do, and what do you remember from Ceylon and Martin County in that area?
Yep. First, let me thank you for doing this. When I got the invitation to participate, I said, good, because, you know, I love those years, and as life goes on, it seems to kind of get remote from it, sure. and I don't feel that way about it, so I'm glad. And I love our county historical societies because they really perform precious function. They keep us connected
Well, thank
with
you.
our history, and so I'm delighted to do this. Well, I was born in 1928 in Salon, Minnesota. My dad was a minister in the local church there, and I think he had Salon, would be Sherburne, and one other. He had three places.
Three churches?
Yeah, that's what did. Gave 3 sermons every Sunday, if you can believe that. And my mom was a good musician, so she would run the choirs and teach piano and try to raise the boys. And I remember those early in my life, but I remember those years. We had a lot of good times, and I really have fond feelings about Salon. And they had a sign out front, the best little small town in America, or something. Is that still up there?
I'm not sure if it's still there or not, but it's in
put it back
the history
up.
book.
Yeah, it's good.
So,
yeah.
busiest little town in America
Right.
or something.
Yeah,
like
right.
That. Sure. Well, from Ceylon, then you went to...
Well, Dad was a Methodist minister, and they had this policy of when they heard the same sermon the third time, they'd ask you to go somewhere else. And so we went from from Salon to Heron Lake. We were there about 5 years, I think, and then we went to Elmore, and we got there, I'm going to say 1938. So we were there before the war began, and then Dad and Mom came to Fairmont in like 1946, and she basically, Dad had a stroke. She worked at the Hamlin Methodist Church there.
Oh, okay.
Not Hamlin, Fairmont Methodist
Fairmont
Church.
Methodist Church, sure. I did take a look at your yearbook the year you graduated,
Yep.
and I saw that you were in a lot of activities.
Yep.
So, what can you tell us about some of those things? I mean, you played football.
Yeah.
I think you had a nickname, didn't you?
I did. They called me Crazy Leg.
Okay.
It actually was Crazy Head, but no, we like kids in those days. I always liked to put studies last and get the athletics, So and those small towns, one of the wonderful things, you could be in anything you wanted to.
Sure.
So I was football, basketball, track, debate, anything that came along, I would be in it.
Then after high school, you went on to college at University of Minnesota?
Yeah. Well, I started at McAllister, and then went broke and transferred to the university, which had, I think, something like $48 a quarter tuition. So I could afford that. Okay. And so I went there, and then went into got drafted. You got a picture of me here.
Sure.
That's
right
for
there.
the Martin County Selective Service Board did that
really?
for me.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was one of the most impressive acts of governmental efficiency I've ever seen. I wrote a note saying, I'd like to be drafted next month, because I had a plan in my bingo. I got,
you got it right away.
Right, yeah. The board approved it immediately, so off I went.
Okay, well, yeah. You were in the Army?
Yeah.
And where were you at?
I was at almost all of it at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Fort Knox.
Yeah, near the gold there.
Okay, sure. And you were in for how long?
2 years.
2 years.
That's what all the draftees got.
Okay. And then you went on to...
One of the reasons I wanted to get in a hurry, because I wanted to get the GI Bill so I could go to law school. So I came back to the University of Minnesota Law School then, the day after I got out of the Army, and so on.
And what did you major in college?
I hope they destroyed the records, but I think I'm going to say political science and history.
Okay. Speaking of political science, when did you first get your interest in politics, or when did that start, and how did it start? Was there a person that inspired you? Or?
Well, it was in the family. Dad his idea of Christianity was that the faith required you to do good works on earth, that service it wasn't a dead faith, it was an active faith. So all of us were encouraged to do something to help others. My older brother became a professor, and my younger brother, Mort, was active as a teacher, and then in the Minnesota Education Association and so on. So we all had that sort of tradition. And then my brother Pete, who went to high school in, I think, Fairmont. I don't know if he completed there, but he went there. He went to McAllister, and they had a young professor there named Hubert Humphrey. And so he said, "Boy, you gotta see this guy. He's hot." And so when I started McAllister, I connected with the mayor's office, and they had a campaign there. I got involved in that. And then when he ran for the U.S. Senate, I asked him if he'd come down to Martin County. They had a Farm Bureau picnic. It wasn't in Fairmont, it was just out of town, I forget where. And he agreed to come.
He did?
Yeah, so we had somewhere in Sentinel, there's got to be a picture of Hubert at that picnic. And of course he had big success, big crowd.
Sure.
And I think it helped him a lot down in what is not known as Democratic territory.
No, it isn't. Did you work on his campaigns then as time went on?
You know, I was not on the inside, but I was, 19 then or something. And I asked, I went up to the headquarters. I said, I got to work for the Humphrey campaign. I got to do something. And so they said, well, we don't have any money, but if you could raise some money. And so I went down to Mankato, and I set up a Humphrey office there, and I got people to help me, and we had a good campaign. This would be 48.
48.
And so that's how I got started. We carried the district unbelievably. I don't think it had been carried by Democrats since Abraham Lincoln.
Then you had a private law practice for a while after you got out of college or after you got out of law school?
I went to Washington when Humphrey got elected. I went to Washington for a year with an outfit called Students for Democratic Action. Humphrey was the national chairman.
Was this volunteer work then?
No, I actually had a job that paid money, not much, but it was a different experience for me. So, and being in Washington, so it was exciting. And Humphrey, the new senator, that was exciting. And then I came home, and I'm just trying to get the time straight here. I may have gone back to McAllister, but I think I went over at the university about that time. And as that we talked about earlier, I finished my undergraduate work there, then went to law school.
Okay. And then you didn't go directly into politics right after law school. You worked for
you know, I was carrying two pails of water. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to be in politics. I just had that in me. And so a guy named Harry McLaughlin, an old pal of mine, now gone, and I set up a little law practice. And I had once been with a firm called Larson, Levenger, Lindquist. And then Orville Freeman picked me as Attorney General in 1960. So I'd been out of law school about 3 years. I really wasn't qualified, but
looks like it worked though.
I took the job anyway and gave it a try. See, so but that was wonderful. Those are wonderful years for me because you have all that juice, you know, and you're going to make it work.
Sure.
That was an exciting thing for me. And I came down to Fairmont a couple of times during that campaign.
So you were Attorney General for how many years?
From May of 1960 to about the last day of 64. And then I went to the Senate.
And then you went to the Senate. And how long was that?
I was in the Senate from then until I was elected vice president and took office in January of 1976. So about 12 or 14 years. And then, of course, as vice president, you're presiding officer, president of the Senate. So in a sense, I was both vice president and involved in the Senate. I wasn't a senator, though.
You were instrumental in making some changes in the vice president's office.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, it was a big change, it turns out. Carter and I talked about this before we got together. And I told him, I said, I really like the Senate. And I bet I could do more good for you there than I can as vice president. I'm not interested in a ceremonial office. Mm-hmm. Don't forget, Humphrey had been vice president.
Right.
And I went to, and it wasn't a happy thing always for Hubert. So I went to see him and I said, what do you recommend? You know this stuff. He said, I think you should do it if you're asked. He said, because it'll broaden you. You learn more about the country and the world. And he said, you can do more in 2 days in the White House than you can here in 2 years. So I took his advice, and I talked to Carter about making it a meaningful office. I said, mm-hmm. And Carter said, I've thought about this. I think you should be in the White House, not like the others were, standby equipment.
So they actually, prior to that, they weren't even in the White House?
No. They were over, they had a fancy office over in the executive office building, but they had nothing to do. Beautiful furniture, but that's awful quiet during the day. Rockefeller told me the thing that bothered him about being vice president is that the phone never rang. And it was people ridiculed it, but it was a big waste of time. And so
it's kind of a figurehead type of position.
Yeah, and 1 second you might be the president. Right. So it wasn't good government either. So Carter did what we now call executivize the vice president, brought him into the White House, made him part of the president's duties. I saw the same information, secret and otherwise, that he did. I talked to the same advisors. I was invited to every meeting in the Oval Office. I could decide not to go, but he told me, every meeting I have, mm-hmm. you're invited to. And nothing like that had ever happened before. And I think most people felt good about that change. And and I was able to, and I think so, since then, every presidential, vice presidential structure has been patterned on what Carter and I did.
Okay. You still keep in contact with Jimmy Carter?
Oh, yes. That's another first. Usually, president and vice president don't talk to each other again. We do.
There are some that don't get along too well, I understand.
No.
So, okay.
They say a vice president every day reminds his president of his mortality.
Well, thinking of your current politics at all these different levels, you're from small town Minnesota, mm-hmm. small town America. Has that influenced you in many ways, or how has that influenced you?
Well, I think it had a lot to do with how I think and what I believe, and my values, and I think what we'd call common sense that you learn, and it's always been a part of me. And for example, when I went down to meet with Carter in the small town of Plains, he said, "What do you think of Plains?" I said, "It's pretty big." I told him about Ceylon, Elma, and I think the fact we're both small town kids,
right?
Came up with a religious background, a little different, but we understood each other. There was something about that mm-hmm. made it comfortable, and we stuck together for 4 tough years.
Yeah.
So that had a big effect on me.
In which position do you think you were able to accomplish the most?
Well, I loved them all. I loved being Attorney General, and I changed that office from what had been kind of a passive legal opinion office mm-hmm. into what I call public protection. And that has changed. Since then, most attorneys generals have seen that as part of their job, and I think that's good. The Senate you know, I was involved in a lot of issues. We'll go through them today. And, you know, I felt like I was getting to know the Senate, the rules, the senators, and I was learning how to get tough things done. And that's not easy with 100 egos walking around there.
Right.
And
right, fairly large egos too.
Oh yeah, some historically large. So you got to do that. And so I love the Senate. And then the changes we made that we discussed in the vice presidency, I think, have really made a big difference in American government.
Right. Yeah, they're still patterning that.
Yep.
Who is, in your career, who is the most interesting, or maybe one of the most interesting people you've met?
Let me not say the most, but Hubert, of course, was, I'd say, almost like a father to me, and brilliant, you know, one of the, probably, if you were forced to say who is the biggest and most powerful, influential Minnesota politician in our history, I think almost everybody would say Hubert Humphrey. Yeah.
What would you? What kind of advice would you give somebody who is interested, a young person that's interested in going into politics?
I give that speech you just gave, and I hope some of you will think about going into politics. And I know what you're thinking. Well, I don't have any money. I don't have a name. Nobody knows me. All this stuff goes to the big shots. I said, well, that wasn't true in my life. I said, I grew up. We never had a dime. Nobody knew my name. But I believed in things, and I went in. First thing you know, I said that can happen to you. And I try to encourage young people. I'm not talking about politics. What kind of politics? But to try to get involved and make the world and the country better. Yep.
Okay. Well, you know, I bet you've had a lot of interviews over your career.
Yeah.
What are some of
this is one of the better ones.
I was just going to say, what's one of the better ones you've had, with the exception of this one?
Yeah.
Or some of the more interesting ones, or, you know, just anything about any that you can think back at?
Well, you know, when I was running for president, the interviews could really be rough. You know, you get into you see it now in the campaign.
Yeah.
Once you get down into the clutches of a primary with some strong opponents, and rocks are being thrown all over, the press gets into the middle of that and tries to make something out of it, which a good journalist should do. And that's those are sometimes long interviews for me. This is very pleasant.
Good, appreciate it. Well, we really appreciate your doing this, Mr. Mondale. It's great to have this as a record of somebody who did come from Martin County. And this, as I had said before, we'll have it on file at the Martin County Historical Society, and it will be on our story.
Thank you. We had these pictures.
Yes.
That I was going to talk about. I don't want you to think I went and made pictures of myself, because I didn't. These were part of an assemblage of pictures put together by the U.S. Senate historian for a leadership conference that I participated in.
And which one is you here now?
Two of them are from Martin County. This is when I was drafted. That's you could see why the Koreans were afraid of us. and this is me and my brother Pete.
Okay.
And
you're on the right?
I'm the little guy there.
Okay.
Pete's older, yeah. Right there somewhere in Ceylon.
It's in Ceylon. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, good. Well, thank you very much. Any closing comments or anything?
I thank you for this. I really enjoy it.
Okay, well, thank you.
This is Walter Mondale for Our Story, Minnesota.
Lenny, that was a good job. Great report.
Thank you.
And it had to be a treat.
It was, yeah. He treated us so well, and just very, very pleasant person and very pleasant interview. Yeah.
Now, I have down here as 2007. You told me during the deal that my records are incorrect. It's 2008.
It's possible, yes.
It's in that ballpark.
Yeah.
But if it's been 2008, that's been 10 years ago already.
10 years, yeah.
Wow. Well, that was a good job, and we really glad you got a chance to do that. We enjoyed that too.
Yeah.
Lenny, thank you again for guest hosting. And again, like I said last time, we're not done with you yet. We got some more reports we're going to have you do. So hope you can keep coming back, and thank you very, very much for guest hosting today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Wow, what'd you think of that? Wasn't that great? Wasn't that great? Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you for coming to visit with us, and thank you, our viewers, for watching. And as we share with you our sponsors that made this show possible, remember, it's not just the past, but the present that tells our story.